Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us at the 2021 edition of Future of Film Showcase, hosted by CBC Gem. My name is Winnie Wang, and I'm the Associate Programmer of the festival. I'm very happy to be joined by Kourtney Jackson for a small conversation about her film Wash Day, as well as her artistic practices. Kourtney, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm excited to chat with you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to finally be talking to you because your film One versus One played at Insomniac, and then I saw Wash Day at Next Wave, and then I've also just seen you at a scene fair. So this is the first time that we're kind of speaking to each other at length, and I have a lot to ask. There's a lot to talk about, so we'll just get right into it. So your latest film, Wash Day, it tells the stories of others, and it's shot on film, whereas One versus One is a more personal story and it's shot on digital, but they're both very experimental in nature. So, what is your relationship with experimental film, and how do you decide the approach you're going to take given all the options that this mode of filmmaking offers?
Um, to be very honest, I wasn't thinking very consciously about format or presentation when I was making those films. One versus One was like my very first attempt at like making a thing that I could possibly put my name on and show to other people. Um, I think with just like not necessarily having a formal education in filmmaking, I've kind of had to just go with my instincts and what feels natural in the story. Um, yeah, so it's kind of just a lot of question marks internally and just hoping everything works out. I think as time has passed and I've just been thinking about like upcoming projects, I have been a little intimidated by the intention that I have to bring to everything now, and just thinking about writing and character development and camera. There's a lot of aspects to storytelling that you have to make decisions in, and I think like being a little bit ignorant about some of the conventions of filmmaking helped me in a lot of ways. So I think now I'm trying to, I don't know, guess like no thoughts had empty my way into a filmmaking career, especially with other things that I want to make, because I do kind of like the unfettered quality of just not knowing how to do anything and seeing what comes out of that. And so I'm trying to like stay in that a little bit more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just going to ask if you felt that your lack of formal training was a strength for you, and it's really great that it is. What training do you have? So you went to Concordia for, it was communication study?
Yeah, so the program was like half communication theory, media criticism, and then there was also production courses. So there was intermedia, video production, sound. So I had a lot of, I kind of had like a multifaceted kind of like art making curriculum in my first year. And then second year was like video production, but it just didn't feel engaging or enriching in any way. And I think looking back on that now, I don't think I could have received it, um, because the things that I'm searching for now in terms of like knowledge, technical practice, et cetera, is something that I have to like search myself, and it wasn't in a school environment. So yeah, that was a time when I was a student learning things within an educational institution.
So you just said that you kind of had like a multifaceted approach to your education in the arts, and I can definitely see that with the collages on your site. And then I listened to the podcast interview you did with the National Film Festival for Talented Youth, in which you said that you wanted to be a visual artist, and also as a kid you wanted to be a fashion designer and a pop star. And then you also said that the title for Wash Day came from a poem that you wrote. So um, you're clearly involved in a lot of types of artistic works, but where do you see your films in the broader constellation of your practice? And I'm curious about how you choose which medium to work with and what you're interested in exploring for the future. And also what interests you about the potential of film. That was a lot, but feel free to grab
Yeah,
on.
we might have to go like an ABC in terms of answering. But I think it's so funny that you like bring up my website and the podcast because I forget that I do these things and that they're out in the world and that people actually look them up. So that's um yeah, just pretty funny to me. But I think like I guess like the different mediums that I've worked with didn't necessarily happen simultaneously. It was just like I went to high school and was doing like collage very heavily and like fell in love with that. And then I went to university and was doing like Illustrator and like making like sonic compositions for the first time. So it was just like um a lot of I guess different stages, different short periods of time essentially where I was just like very heavily involved in writing or cutting up magazines and gluing them and uploading them to a website that I now have. But yeah, I think like I've honestly been asking myself that question, like what next? What am I gonna do? Um in terms of poetry, I realized that as much as I'm like slightly embarrassed about all the angsty shit that I wrote when I was just like 14, 15 was actually like so integral to my process. Like I see it in One Versus One, I see it in Wash Day, even though it's not necessarily like a poem that I'm reciting or reading. I think like the experimentation and also the visual format of writing poetry and also the brevity of language and words and rhythm is something that I have unconsciously implemented into filmmaking. So I think like that's something that I might go back into and settle into. I think after making Wash Day, I've kind of been riddled with like a self-consciousness because now I'm just like a little bit more hyper aware of everything that I'm doing. And so the thought of like sitting down to like write a poem just kind of freaks me out a little bit because it was just something that I did without a care in the world and just with no um yeah, self-awareness. It all comes back to just like ignorance is bliss apparently, but yeah.
That's a great approach. That's awesome.
Yeah, I kind of just like I don't know. I feel like sorry, my roommate's cat's behind me and just appeared out of nowhere and kind of freaked me out. Sorry. I lost my track of thought. Sorry, what was I saying?
That we are all just head empty, no thoughts, and that is the best way.
Yeah, sorry. Honestly, like I don't know. I feel like I hope that's gonna be the last time that I get distracted. But sorry. Anyway, yes, no thoughts, head empty is the mantra.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm also fascinated by your ability to capture subjectivity and intimacy across your works. There's a real physicality to Wash Day where it feels like almost you can like feel the water hitting your skin and like you're really in the space with these subjects, and it's such a wonderfully rich and textured film, with like the film grain and like the home video feel, but also with like the nuances and complexities articulated by your subjects. And they talk about very personal subjects, like from hair as a tool for self-expression but also survival, and then taking back agency in adulthood through grooming and hairstyling. What interests you about representing these details and specifics, and setting this in like a very private and domestic space? Yeah.
I think personally I've just always wanted to be in close proximity to other people, whether that's emotionally, physically, and I felt that I feel like with the shower, like there was yes there was like the overarching concept of vulnerability and intimacy, and like I was thinking about that in terms of like proximity with the camera, um but I feel like um sorry, can you ask the question again? I'm really sorry.
It's okay. I was wondering about your curiosity and fascination with the private and domestic space.
Yes, sorry. I'm so sorry. Okay. Yeah. I honestly feel like it is very natural for me to want to be in close proximity with the people that I'm working with. I think I'm very nosy and I like to hear other people's stories. I also do a lot of videography with like theater companies in the city, so I also do a lot of interviews, and I just think like um, hearing about somebody's internal process, whether it's with or regarding themselves or something that they're working on, and other instances that I've interviewed people. But I don't know, I get nourishment from that as an artist, and as also as a human being. And I think with Wash Day, everything kind of fell in line with interviewing these subjects in their closets, and also having a conversation about myself and the answers that I had with to the questions that I was also asking them. And I think like I don't know if Wash Day could have um, manifested in the way that it did without the framework of being intimate and close and vulnerable, and establishing that as like an anchor in the process and not necessarily like the making of the film.
Did you have any concerns when you were approaching this project? It's such a departure from your first project, in which you're talking more about your own relationship with religion and faith, and growing up with that alongside family and your school. So when you're approaching this, through the lens of, the stories of these three women, did you have anything that you were maybe hesitant about? Any concerns or precautions that you took to make this feel like an emotionally and physically safe space?
Mhm. I was absolutely terrified throughout the entire making of the film. I was really scared about um, what people, this is just, it's shitty to even say, but I was honestly really scared about what people would think. And I thought that I wouldn't have the ability to justify why I was making the film or why I was giving a platform to these people to speak. I was worried about whether or not the people in the film would see or believe themselves to be represented accurately. Um, I was worried about the ethics of shooting somebody in the way that I did. Um, and also because it was my second time making a thing, I was just scared that everything was just going to explode, like the camera was going to explode in my hand, nothing was going to show up on the film. There was just tremendous fear throughout the entire thing. I think one of the ways that I ensured, or at least attempted to I guess break down any walls or remove any hierarchies that could materialize in me having a camera and shooting them in the way that I did was I made my own wash day film, like a tiny concept film starring myself. It was a mess. Just because I didn't have a tripod and I was also shooting myself in the shower. So that kind of just was a bit hard to navigate. But um, yeah, it was also me going through the same motions. I answered some of the questions that I asked them. So it was kind of just like a wash day starring Kourtney. Here's Kourtney saying everything that she's also saying, and also just like having like a preliminary conversation with them and telling them like I'm an open book, you can ask me anything that you want, and this is like an ongoing thing. So yeah, I think that was one of the very distinct direct things that I did to kind of ensure that everybody felt safe throughout the process.
So you've also taken this film to many festivals now, and it's been a whole experience. From pitching it to making this, to making your preliminary short, to making the final short. And it's gotten such an incredible response from people. I'm constantly seeing, the new festivals that it's being programmed at, which is incredible. What's your reaction to this whole experience? Especially touring it and hearing from audiences and speaking with programmers.
Hmm.
Is there anything that you wanted to speak about?
It's been really surreal. I remember premiering it at Next Wave. It was a Toronto premiere technically, but I had a couple community screenings with Sisterhood Media that felt like awesome and great, and I was like running amok in London, Ontario, and that just felt super cool. And it felt like I was just like with good people, and it felt very intimate and felt very appropriate for um, the film and the discussions that took place around it. Then I had the premiere at Next Wave, and that felt really good. That was also pretty nerve wracking because that was the first time that I was like, it was like on a large screen, and there were people in an auditorium. And then, the pandemic happened, and I just thought that that was the end of it. Um, but I throughout everything of Wash Day touring and all the opportunities that I've gotten and people reaching out, like I've really um, understood the power of social media. Everybody always says that, like the power of the internet, but like I um, really came to terms with um, reach and how far Instagram, like Twitter, social media, different social media outlets can really um, send your film across the world. Um, and so, yeah, I think that's been my biggest takeaway because, yeah, it kind of blew up after Breakthroughs. And Breakthroughs was the first festival that had to transition online that Wash Day got accepted into. And so from that point on, I was just very blown away. I was very humbled by everything. Still to this day, I'm just like a little stupefied every time it gets another chance to screen. And it's also been screening in places that I've never been before. Like I kind of feel like Watch Day is just out in the world, traveling, backpacking across Europe literally, and I'm just like in my home looking at my four walls all day. So yeah, I'm very happy. I think it's also been an incredible learning experience in terms of like distribution and how to have conversations with people overseas. I've also learned about a lot about financing in terms of like the industry, marketing. So yeah, I guess it's been like a mini film school in that way for sure.
Amazing. And then you were also selected as a Sundance Ignite Fellow last year, which, congrats.
Thank you.
Um, what have you learned since making Wash Day and then joining their program? How have you, developed as a filmmaker, and what projects are you working on now?
Um, that's a good question. I think self-discovery has been such a huge experience for me in this past year. Um, Dually as an artist and as a person, and I kind of feel like those get enmeshed when you're a filmmaker. But I've had to ask myself a lot of questions. I've had to ask myself what my ethics are in terms of making films and why I'm doing what I'm doing. So yeah, it's been an internal philosophical spiritual awakening more so than it's like I'm learning how to produce another thing, which I guess I am doing as well. But I think like I've been really taken back by how much I've had to like I honestly thought I was an introspective person already. I thought I was very into myself, but I realized that I was not at all. Yeah, so I guess like getting to know myself as a filmmaker has been like a very strange but also a very needed journey throughout Wash Day being a thing, but also Sundance and like working on new things. um in terms of upcoming projects, like I am writing something and it's very abstract and it's giving me a hard time, but I can tell you the things I'm researching. So I'm looking into Black performance theory, Black sensibilities, subjectivity, which is a key word in this interview, I believe. Um, yeah, and I feel like I'm kind of getting my ass beat throughout the research process, but I feel like it can't happen any other way.
That's very exciting. I can't wait to see what you come out with.
Me too.
Where can people find you online?
You can follow me at KJJJAX on Instagram, maybe on Twitter. I don't know if you want to follow me on Twitter as well. You can also follow Wash Day Film on Instagram to see the updates for the festivals and screenings and all that. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining me, Kourtney. I hope everyone sees her incredible film at the Future of Film Showcase, now streaming on CBC Gem. Thank you for your time, Kourtney.
Thanks, Winnie.